mob to smear his reputation and steal the election, Albert Patterson emerged victorious as the Democratic nominee for Attorney General of Alabama.
This threw the Phenix City people into just an absolute panic. They clearly saw now that they were in deep trouble, because in Alabama the Attorney General was a very powerful figure who had the authority and the power to remove the local district attorney and to, in effect, take over the city, organize his own grand jury and things like that. And Albert Patterson put them on notice that he was going to Birmingham and have them indicted for tampering with election returns.
Hugh Bentley and the RBA couldn't be happier. For once, the future of their town was bright. But their celebration didn't last.
The night of June the 18th, 1954, which was only about 3 weeks after he'd been elected, he was in his office one Friday night, and he came out about 9 o'clock to go to his car parked next to the building and go home. And he managed to struggle up, even though he was severely crippled.
When I pulled up in front of the office, there's a crowd, big crowd there. And I walked up on the sidewalk, and one of the city policemen told me that my father had been shot, and they had taken him to the hospital. And I didn't know if he was dead then. I looked at the blood on the sidewalk, and you could tell by the amount of it and the consistency of it that it was a serious proposition. And I went in the emergency room, and he was lying on a gurney there. And standing over in the other end of the emergency room was Fuller and Farrell and Matthews, the sheriff, and all that bunch of folks. And so I told them, I said, I don't want any of you to touch my father. Everything had just gone to pieces. People were just weeping and wailing, and it was just terrible. The thing had to be pulled together. It was very bad.
About 5 weeks after the assassination, it was clear that the investigation was going nowhere, and there was a great clamor in the state to do something about this.
Well, I said, well, the people that are investigating my father's murder are the most logical suspects, and they're covering it up, and I want something done about it. Well, the next morning, the headline in the newspapers was that high. Patterson accuses investigators of being involved. And believe you me, the thing began to move then. The next morning, that thing began to move.
One afternoon about 4:30, I was in Phenix City in the main square, and I looked down the street and I saw this column of trucks, Army trucks rolling in. And that was the first that we knew that they'd declared martial law in Phenix City.
And I think people, frankly, were relieved. We were sick of and tired of the reputation that Phenix City had, and we felt, I think most people in Columbus felt it was past time, it was cleaned up. Of course, the war was over. Don't forget that. The war was over, and so we were not pressured here by this terrible necessity of entertaining these soldiers.
The National Guard would go out with trucks, Army trucks, and raid these places, these so-called Ritz cafes and Bridge Cafe and what have you, and take out just tons and tons of gambling equipment, slot machines and other types of gambling equipment. Take it out to the city dump and set it on fire. And these National Guardsmen took over all the law enforcement and even administrative functions of the city. no longer was it a uniformed policeman who was patrolling the streets or walking the beat, but it was a National Guardsman who was walking the beat, carrying out police powers. Once you got a new sheriff, that meant that Hoyt Shepherd could no longer run these illegal enterprises because the sheriff would simply go out and put him in jail if he did it. So you eliminated the fear. No longer was there any fear that if you went to the police and complained about something, that you might be arrested rather than the person you were complaining about.
Now that the National Guard was in charge, the facts of the murder began to surface. Witnesses placed both Arch Farrell and Albert Fuller at the scene of the crime.
Albert Fuller was a tough, and there was no ifs, ands, or buts about that. So, and nobody was surprised at his involvement, alleged involvement, or that he was fingered as the guy and all that sort of stuff. I mean, he was, in many ways, he was the perfect fall guy.
It was about justice, and there's not a lot of it around. And I think that this heroism inspires heroism, that courage encourages courage. You look back and see somebody else had these problems, and this is what they did about it, so maybe I can solve mine.